parallel is back, and it's just like you've seen it before, only a little different. Sit back and listen as we dive into the process of remastering the story where it all began. With a parallel universe, parallel Doctor, and parallel monsters, this can only be parallel. Successive series to a parallel in 2019, Jamie Marsh, creator of the series, began production on a sunny afternoon back in May of 2020. But why do this remaster in the first place?
So I initially came up with the idea of re-editing the whole of my Series 1 back last summer when I was doing the audio commentaries for Series 1. And I just saw how much I could have, or I have improved in my animating since 2016 when I made that first series, especially the first two stories, which I had considered being the only edits I did that first story, a bit like Matt the Who editor had done this year with his remaster of his first story, which is really good by the way. You should definitely go check his one out. So I had considered doing it like that, but there was more to the overall story that I knew I wanted to add in and change and just make a little better per episode. So of course I decided to re-edit the whole of Series 1. So, just a little project. I've been re-editing Series 1, which you would have seen by now. But I, in my present time, being the 28th of May, have just finished the re-edit of Episode 1. Just exporting now. So, exciting.
Editing was a long and slow process. Jamie first set out to rewatch all the episodes again before piecing together the original footage.
So to edit this series, the first thing I did was found my very old laptop out that had all the footage on and moving it to my new computer. This then meant I had all the original clips as they were when I animated them back in 2016. I then was able to re-edit everything clip by clip, scene by scene, episode by episode. It did mean it took a lot longer to do, but it gave me the freedom of a new outlook in terms of editing the clips. I don't have that much freedom anyway. I have to do each scene, each sequence one after the other because of how I animate it. There's not a lot of overlap like you would with a normal film. A lot more choice because of actors talking in front of the camera and stuff like that. But I was able to stitch it together in different lengths and orders and think about how I would do the story now with a better look at how you make films because of my university course. One of the big important changes visually that I did to the series was the colour. Because I now have a better program on my computer from the first series, when I first edited the series, just by changing those colours you could really change the quality of the footage. Even though I was using an iPod back then, a really old iPod, those colours really make the footage look so much better in the story.
Not all original footage was up to standard to be used again, and so reanimating had to be used.
For some of my scenes and sequences, I couldn't use the original footage. For several reasons, it was just not at the quality I wanted for these new edits. And so most of that came down to terrible use of green screen. Especially for the first story, I had a street scene, a high street scene that was all done with green screen, and I knew that I could improve that massively just by not having a green screen at all. I didn't need to. I now have the set building skills to create a really nice looking street for the alien to land in. Unfortunately, because it was lockdown, the first lockdown, I didn't have all the figures I needed with me. So what I did instead was I used the original footage and created PNGs, so then I could move the people around on the screen and create the story in that way. I think it turned out okay, and I really hope no one noticed that little change there.
Turn and face the strain. Changes. Don't wanna be a richer man. Changes. Turn and face the strain. Changes. It's gonna have to be a different man. Time may change me, but I can't trace time.
All the original lines had to be re-recorded for better quality, so Jamie had to get back into character once again.
I almost knew straight away one of the things I would definitely change was re-recording all the lines. Not only do I have a slightly better, deeper voice for the Doctor, but I was also just able to get better quality audio because of my my better quality microphone. The voice I struggled getting back into the most was Horus, the trader. It was a difficult voice that I hadn't done for a while, hadn't done since I recorded series 2, and I just found it a little bit difficult just to get that little bit more high pitched. Claire was also slightly difficult because of course I'm doing that female voice. I did have to re-record all of Megan's lines, which my girlfriend of course wasn't overly happy about. And I then had to ask my sister to come back and do a couple of lines for the couple of characters she played when she first did it. So I was actually able to get all the original actors back in to record all my lines.
Music has an important role of telling the story of Doctor Who. That is certainly no different in parallel. Careful decisions were made on which pieces from the original episodes would stay and what new music could be sourced.
Soundtracks was a difficult one to get the right balance for. I knew I wanted to keep it similar to its original edit, so it still felt the same, but I also wanted to add in new pieces of music that I knew would definitely improve its overall story. Sometimes this made it more difficult to find some soundtracks, some of those specific ones that I used from the original edits, ones that I really liked, that I thought fit. Of course, being no lyrics, you have to try and remember the tune and just look and try and find those pieces of music. The big change was Claire's theme. In the original edit, Claire was using a piece of music from Mummy and the Orient Express called Those Sad Sad Eyes, which was for Clara. Really, the only piece of the bit of the music that was really for Claire's theme was the first few notes.
And there's that smile again. I don't even know how you do that.
Which I didn't think quite worked as a motif for her. So instead what I did was I used a completely different piece of music repetitively so that it was sort of recognisably part of Claire's character, which was Fragrance from Closing Time in Series 6. And I really think this piece of music just fits in with the character I was trying to get through with Claire. A theme that I completely stayed the same was of course the trader, Horus. I can't change that piece of music, it's so perfect for him. It's by Ross Burgston, who does really great pieces of music on YouTube. And it just fits so well with the characterization for Horus. It's so sinister and calm and foreboding, and every time you hear it you just feel, I hope you feel just tense to be in the room with him, because that's how it's meant to be. At the same time it's got that little bit of sort of manicness to it. It goes calm and then suddenly goes much faster, and it's like him. He's calm and then he's there. He's right in your face and he could kill you, and that's really what I'm trying to get through with Horus in that first series, definitely. Another character who got a new theme was the Dark Horde. Well, I knew I wanted to give a sort of a nice repetitive motif for the first story, and I found this piece of music called My Humble Abode, which was just sort of a nice sinister undertone with sort of electronic-y noises, just to give that first story a piece of music that could be recognisable and unique to it. A thing that I did during Series 2 that I definitely moved into doing for this edit as well was using unreleased soundtracks from Murray Gold. This just meant that I had some more unique pieces of music that you didn't associate quite as much as with the original show or find in the soundtrack. People of course release these unreleased pieces of music on YouTube. Massive thank you to them. Another thing that I did during Series 2 was starting to use Torchwood music, which just meant that I had a more of a made everything more recognisably Torchwood, especially with that little bit of music, the bit they used during Series 2 and then throughout the Torchwood series. So then you knew that what the Doctor was in was definitely Torchwood.
Now completed the re-edit of episode 4 of Parallel, and all the extra little bits that I needed to reanimate for episode 5 is now done as well. So now I need to move on to re-editing episode 5.
Special effects was a large part of bringing this series to life. With added spaceships, explosions and lots more, you can never have enough of some cracking sci-fi.
Something that I never quite got the hang of back in 2016 was green screen and visual effects. Something that I definitely mastered or at least improved on during Series 2. This involved green screen being much better used. I was able to do it for the Doctor falling after the Vortex Manipulator. Maybe one that didn't quite work as well was Claire running down the corridor in her dreams. And then, of course, I got that really nice green screen backdrop for the Thames scene, which I think works really nicely. Other green screen elements was of course explosions, explosions, explosions and more explosions, all looking great. But as well as that, we have some really nice green screen ships that I was able to get from YouTube. Especially in that first story, I was able to actually have a spaceship that looked at least more realistic than the original. And then a big thing that I decided to do was pullouts, or establishing shots. In the first story, I was able to get that really nice shot of Torchwood, which was definitely something that I reused from the exploding base at the end of Series 2. And that was just a really nice wide shot that I did in layer after layer after layer. So then you could really feel that base was in the centre of London. I did the same effect for Torchwood 1 in the Scottish Highlands. I never really got the idea that the base was just in the middle of the Scottish Highlands in the original version, so having that put out from the Doctor really gave the impression of where this story was set.
But I set fire to the rain, watched it pour as I touched your face. When it burned, well I cried 'cause I heard it screaming out your name, your name.
Additional scenes were created to flesh out the stories and bring a new lease of life to some episodes that needed it.
For some episodes, the story had to be slightly shifted. In the middle of the story, the Cybermen two-parter, I decided to switch things around a bit. The first episode never really had a lot going on. The Doctor just sat around and waited for the scanner to find out what the source of the metal was. But nothing really else happened. And I knew that I wanted the seeds of what's going on in number 10 Downing Street to start in the first part, and end in the second, not just appear in the second part, which is something I always thought was a shame that I did. So this way, all the stuff to do with the President was in part 1, and then what I could do was I could add more into the Professor's investigations into what was going on with Cybermen taking the power from Torchwood. This then meant that both episodes were much more fleshed out, the story and the pacing happened much better, much nicer, and everything, all the events sort of unfolded much more naturally. This is the same sort of thing I did at the start of episode 9. I really wanted to do a bit more world building with the Savine taking over everything, not just Torchwood and Unit, which is definitely what I showed before. I really wanted them to be taking over more than just where the main characters were. So having that Savine take over that plane, and the plot of the gun from Torchwood 1 ending up in the lab to be used against the TARDIS, was definitely something that meant that there was more world building within that story.
Hold on, there's a signal coming through.
Calling the War Council of Gallifrey. This is the Doctor.
A nice surprise for this series was the addition of a very special moment in Doctor Who's history.
Good luck. Stand by. Ready. Commencing calculation.
I better help.
And for my next trick...
I hope a big surprise that everyone was happy with was the inclusion of the scene from Day of the Doctor. This was a big thing, and I knew when I sort of worked it out halfway through this edit that wouldn't it be great if when the Metacrisis Doctor got his TARDIS back, he was able to save Gallifrey. This then helped with the Professor's story coming to a close, or not coming to a close, but making more sense near the end, and so I just made this really nice epic ending for that first series, and a really nice ending to the overall story of that series by having somewhere to go.
No, sir. Ah! All 13.
To do this reanimating of the original footage from Day of the Doctor, of course I had to fetch out my TARDIS, which is just up there, for the Capaldi TARDIS, and make it look like Matt Smith's, light it more like Matt Smith's, give it a bit of lens flares, all that sort of stuff. I also had to find out David Tennant's TARDIS and mess around with making that look like his, with more walls going around and all that. And also the more difficult one was doing the War Doctors, which was also just David Tennant's TARDIS, but with some roundel walls going on behind. But the other thing I wanted was, I really wanted a really nice new figure for the General. So to do that, I used a few figures in order to make him, and so I made a custom figure just so then that scene looked as close to the original scene as I could, but with my Doctor slotted in there. And I thought it was really nice that he says, "No sir, all 13, and then the Metacrisis Doctor pulls that lever.
I'm currently, right now, exporting the very final episode of my re-edit. So that means it is now all finally done.
And now the story is complete again. It's been a long journey, but it hasn't finished yet. The question is, what will be in store for Series 3?
And that was it. I done the edit. It was a long old process, but it was worth it in the end for just those little improvements or big improvements that I did per episode to make it up to scratch with what I can make now. And of course now that means I'm looking into finishing Series 3 and seeing where the Metacrisis Doctor is now.